Good evening, everybody. James from Northwest Metalworks here, and continuing on our discussion on bands from hard rock and heavy metal bands from the Northwest, included in our Rusted Metal reference guide that we did a couple years ago. This is the letter D for some D bands. First one I got is Daddy Hatebox, which was Steve Litwin on Peter Litwin on vocals from Coffin Break and Steve Weed from Tad on drums. I think it was kind of a goof band, supposedly towards Mother Love Bone, supposedly selling out and getting signed and that sort of thing. But that's pretty underrated little grunge record, actually. Pretty heavy. It's kind of a fun one. Next band is DC LaCroix. There's a debut promo hype sticker and a later on release that includes the debut, which is actually not their debut. I take that back. It's their second record. Debut was a self-titled, self-released one called DC LaCroix with a Y instead of the X that changed it to. Sylvie LaCroix was the vocalist. Dan Christofferson, thus the DC LaCroix. They did their first record up in Seattle and recorded the second record, and then they got signed to first Black Dragon and then Medusa, put out the US release of this and then second record. And they moved down to LA, kind of retooled the lineup with a different bassist and drummer and try to make a go of it there. And let's see, what do we have next? Decadence. I think they just did this one tape. They're a Bellingham metal band. A little bit later, 94 was when this came out. Let's see, what do we got next here? It's a little reissue of their original CD and cassette release from, I think it was 91 or 92 this first came out. With Death Squad was Olympia thrash metal band. Brian Sparhawk was on bass. He was also in a punk band that I forget the name. Jerry Ziegler on drums and Tom Kaiser on vocals as well. Eric Pugh guitar. It was a pretty cool thrash band. Played a lot of shows back then. So kind of a hardcore punk thrash crossover, the Dehumanizers. Drummer was Infra Ed was Ed Portnow. His brother is David Portnow that did Everrat and Subcore Records. So he did a couple, three records they did on, I think the first couple are on Subcore in the US, and then they did one on another label. Got the infamous Kill Lou Guzzo 7-inch. This was a yellow vinyl reissue from 92. I think it first came out in like 86, 87 range. And this was Lou Guzzo was for those of you that aren't from this area, Lou Guzzo was a TV sort of personality on the news that most notably hated rock and roll when it came out, and he was old enough to still have hung around and hate punk rock when that came later on, and everybody didn't care for him too much. And Dehumanizers made a song to poke fun of him that was pretty funny, and they ended up suing Lou's people sued the label, or the TV station did, or something like that. Funny joke, as Dave Portnow told me when we did an interview for Rusted Metal, that sent him a cease and desist, and so he just pressed up more copies until they sued him. So another little thing that's kind of interesting is, was their first two demo tapes reissued on a CD a few years back. So it's kind of cool with some bonus tracks. Let's see, what else do we have here next? Trying to do these in order somewhat. So, we got John Duvall. So John Duvall was the guitarist of Culprit. This was his solo band after Culprit split up. Had Jeff McCormick on drums, Terry Tandisky on vocals, who was in an earlier band with Lenny Rutledge from Sanctuary. So Headbangers Records did this recently, European label. That's their demo tape, 7-song demo tape that they had out back then, 87, I think. Let's see, what else do we got? Don't have the demo tape from these guys, but I do a couple little flyers. Dusade was a Portland thrash band, it was kind of cool, and they're in this show too. Crying Shame, I forgot to mention, a Portland metal band as well, it was pretty cool from back late 80s, early 90s range. What else do we got? Got a little promo photo of Debutante, which was kind of a goth, crossover gothy hard rock, a little bit of punk hard rock metal kind of vibe to it. Sort of in that pre-grunge kind of realm. Bass player is Howard Binner. It's in Palooka, still running around. He had a couple different singers. Sean Burnell also was in the band on guitar. He was a roadie for the Overlord guys, and when we had the first Metal Fest, Palooka had a mini Overlord set, which was pretty cool, where Steve Van Loo got up and Sean Burnell played guitar with Glenn Logan, who is the original guitarist from Overlord that's in Palooka, and a couple of the Palooka guys on bass and drums. And that was pretty fun. They did a handful of Overlord songs, and Sean knew all the songs really well. But yeah, Howard made these really cool CDs, which was of their demo tapes with their two different singers. Greg Pemby was the first, and then Brian Sane as Brian Insane was the second one. So that's kind of cool. They cut quite a few songs, actually. Hopefully that'll come out at some point. Let's see what else we have here. I got Diamondback, which was a metal band. I think this was 89 this came out. Had Jeff Carell on vocals, who went on to do this band in the 90s, which is kind of more of a grunge thing, was Dr. Unknown. He did a couple demo tapes and a couple different lineups. Eventually, towards the second half of the band's tenure in the 90s, Ray and Derek, the drummer and bass player of Heir Apparent, were in the band. Let's see, what else do we have here? Oh, we got Dirty Rhythm from Portland. There's a little flyer and their cassette tape. And I think it's also put out as a CD as well. I think it was a Portland label, actually. It's like 91, I think. It's a pretty cool hard rock hair metal type of thing. They were kind of on the up and coming sort of thing, but unfortunately just didn't break out of the Northwest, as typical of a lot of bands. You got sealed copy of Dr. Mastermind, which was on Shrapnel Records, 87, 88. This was Matt McCourt and Dean, singer of Wild Dogs, on vocals and bass, with Dean Castronova of the Wild Dogs on drums. Now, of course, plays for Journey and has played for many other bands over the years. And there's a guitarist named Kurt James, who was kind of sort of in the Yngwie Malmsteen classical metal shredder kind of guy. I think he was in... I forget what band he was in before that, so this is kind of a cool band from Spokane, Doc Rocket from the 70s, actually. Kind of in the realm of Budgie, the British early hard rock proto metal power trio. These guys were also a trio. In fact, they even covered Budgie a couple times earlier before their first record. Their debut came out in 1979. It was released on a small label in Spokane that also put out Cracker, which was another local band, rock band. And it's significant in that Tom Hall engineered their first album when he was still a student at the college there, Eastern Washington University. And also Terry Date was the was the assistant engineer. Both those guys went on to be pretty well known in Seattle in studio recording. And the interesting thing is, so this is the second album. I don't have the first anymore. I did. Unfortunately, now they're very expensive. I haven't been able to land one yet that's not an arm and a leg. But they actually did 3 records, 79. This one, they broke up a couple years later, reformed, did this record in 89. It sounds again like 70s, like progressive 70s hard rock proto metal stuff, like the first record did. And then kind of split up again. Got to back together around late 90s, 2000 or so. Did a CD themselves, and then that's the last we've heard of them. I did talk to um, the bass player Lauren Works. I didn't unfortunately get him for an interview for Rusted Metal, but I talked to him a good bit. Here's hoping somebody puts out at least their first couple records, reissues them. It's pretty cool. What else do I have? Oh, this is kind of an interesting thing. So this is a side project called Dark Load, and they did. It was Kim Thile so it's brainchild of Jeff Gilbert, the Brain Pain guy who put on a lot of shows and had the radio metal show, and Jeff also had Ground Zero and Coma Records that put out Metal Church's first record in the Northwest Metal Fest compilation, Mace's debut, Mistrust record that we reissued recently on Northwest Metalworks. And so he was the guy behind this, and it was Kim Thile from Soundgarden on guitar, Paul Larkin from I forgot the name of the punk band. He's from a UK punk band from the late 70s, early 80s. And Bill Rieflin from Ministry, probably most known, but he goes way back to being a Seattle guy and playing in one of the first punk bands, the Telepaths, as well as what that evolved into, the Blackouts. And so this is kind of a fun thing. And they have a track on this Smell the Fuzz compilation from Guitar Magazine and Metal Blade. But I also have a demo tape that's another song. So they at least did 2. And this has never been released. So I'm going to get this transferred pretty soon and give it a listen. So that's kind of a neat little thing. And then the last thing is, they're not a metal band, but I thought I'd mention them as they're kind of a cool band, was Dixon House Band. Featured a gal on guitar named Chrissy Sheftis, who she plays also a couple solos on Heart's Baby Lestrange album. They had the same management, Ken Kinnear, for Albatross. And Dixon House was led by Dixon House himself, so it's named after the keyboardist. It's pretty keyboard heavy stuff, kind of in the Styx sort of realm, Kansas. There's a couple good hard rockers that Chrissy kind of tears it up on, so that's why I mention it. It's kind of a cool thing. It's usually one of those records you can find fairly cheaply. It's pretty good. So yeah, so that's all I got for props. There is a few, much as every letter I've done so far, there's a few more bands I didn't mention that are in Rusted Metal, and likely a couple we missed probably as well. So that's it for this one. Stay tuned this week, because in a couple days I'm going to be dropping a special announcement for our new band bio that's coming out this year. This will be the first public, sort of press announcement of it. So check back here on Wednesday and see what it is. All right. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next time.